Elaine, and I'm your public speaking teacher, probably, and I'm talking to you about your outline. So in the first two videos, we talked about the introduction, exactly what you need to write in the introduction portion of your outline, and then in video number 2, we talked specifically about this inoculation slide. So now we're going to move on to the next part of this, and so specifically we're going to talk about main point number 2 and possibly main point number 3 if we get to that. Okay, so first I'm asking for you guys to write out your transitions between your main points. So what I mean when I want you to write out your transition, and the reason we do this is because sometimes we assume that people understand the connection between A and B. We understand that people understand how we believe that people can intuitively understand why we took this direction or what two things have in common. When you're doing public speaking, you don't really want to make that assumption. And the reason you don't want to make that assumption is because you're taking the audience on a guided journey. While we do want the audience to form their own thoughts, think about when you're walking right next to somebody, and if you kind of if they don't tell you where you're going, sometimes you end up bumping into them because you think you're going to turn right, and you actually turn left. And it's just, you can focus more on that person when the person says, hey, we're going to turn right up here, and then nobody bumps into anybody else. So kind of think about that thing. And the reason I'm asking you to write these transitions out is because sometimes this is like the easiest part to forget to say. So go ahead and write that out, plan how those dots connect already. And so what you see right here in this outline is write out your transition, recap, preview, and connect the dots. Okay, so this is what this student did. So this student said, so overall, Mac is a better choice, especially when it comes to media. So when we look at the student did Macs are too expensive and refuted it with Macs are more reliable over a few years. Nobody really needs Mac. Macs are better suited to companies that specialize in graphics. Windows are becoming the same. And generally, Macs, and then he refutes it with Macs are more stable than PCs. Okay, so connecting the dots, he says that Macs are a better choice, especially when it comes to media. So that kind of recaps what we're talking about here, but not exactly. So think about what else the student could have said. So how do we refute this even, or how do we connect these dots even more strongly? So we're talking about, so you can see that Macs are better suited to certain individuals. And then you can move on to this next. So if this student decided to use a graph, and when we're talking about graphs, the graph tells its own story. So that graph, you should be able to title the story of this main point by titling the story that this graph tells. And so this student decided to use a graph. You've got the graph that shows the ratio of PCs to Mac purchases, and then the student is showing how in recent years the gap is considerably closing. Macs will continue to close the gap. Okay, so the way that this graph worked out is that the story this graph is telling is how Macs are having similar, they're closing the gap in sales between Macs and PCs. So go ahead and title this main point. So something that you could say here, if we're looking at the similarity between this main point and this main point, the way to connect the dots are, so not only are Macs, so what we could have said in this transition instead is, not only are Macs, better than PCs regarding stability in media, they're also becoming more popular. And so you see how we've covered point A and point B. We're connecting it with this not only. So we want to do that kind of a thing. All right. Let me know if you have any questions, and the next video will cover the next portion of this outline.